Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen McGrath, Head of Public Affairs, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hi everyone.
I see that your first item, Dennis, is on the Judiciary and Diversity. Where are we on this important area?
Well, we haven't travelled far at all, and an article by the new Law Society president exposes how little progress there's been. Here's the story. Lubna Shuja, new president of the Law Society, has written an article entitled "We're in the Foothills of True Judicial Diversity," and her article explains why. In a nutshell, let's be clear, progress in diversity in the judiciary is nowhere near good enough. The statistics she illustrates show that progress is grindingly slow, and many groups are significantly underrepresented still. The justice system, as the president rightly states, touches every aspect of our lives, from defending our constitutional rights to resolving disputes between neighbours, families, or businesses. Everyone should feel they have a place in our justice system, she says. The judiciary is one of the most important and visible symbols of justice and authority in our country. If the judiciary does not broadly reflect the makeup of our society, we risk undermining the social contract that binds us all together. However, the judiciary is still overwhelmingly white and male, particularly at more senior levels. The statistics on judicial appointments are alarming. Take a look yourself at the numbers in this article. The government's own figures from the MOJ show that progress in improving the diversity of judges in England and Wales has been far too slow, and in some cases has halted. Most damning of all, there's been no improvement at all in black representation on the bench in almost a decade. The figure has fluctuated just above 1% every year since 2014, with just a 0.07 percentage point increase over an 8-year period. The percentage of judges from a non-barrister background has also fallen from 37% in 2014 to just 31% in 2022, which might suggest socioeconomic diversity could even be in decline. Black judges currently make up 1.09% of the judiciary, compared to 1.02% in 2014. And it is estimated it would take until the year 2149, yes, I said 2149, for the proportion of the judiciary who are black to match current estimates for the general population by that time. At the current rates of progress, it would take until 2033 before the percentage of Asian judges would reflect the wider population. Similarly, women make up around a third of judges today, and current trends suggest it will be another decade before half of all judges are women. Shuja explains that we need a judiciary that truly reflects our diverse society, and she urges the government to have a clearer roadmap to ensure much swifter progress is made in improving judicial diversity. It is the process of appointment that is problematic, according to Shuja. The Law Society have been calling for the abolition of what is called statutory consultation, a process where the Judicial Appointments Commission consults with sitting judges about new appointments. Described by some as secret soundings, this process is separate to the requirement for each candidate applying to become a judge to nominate 2 referees. The Society believe this disadvantages candidates from underrepresented groups and is unnecessary, given the assessments done at other stages in the selection process. Shuja concludes that there cannot be equality of opportunity if the judiciary appears to be less accessible to certain professions or groups of people. Everyone's outlook on life has been shaped by their background and upbringing. We all have unconscious biases that affect our decision-making. A more diverse judiciary, she says, would reduce the risk of unconscious bias in judicial decision-making. And this would help increase public confidence in the judiciary as a whole and the justice system more widely. I agree entirely.
As do I. Now, the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman has published their report, Equal Justice, Learning Lessons from Complaints about People's Human Rights. The report highlights how councils should take into account human rights when making decisions and designing services. The Ombudsman are sharing their findings on complaints about people's human rights, they say, to help councils to incorporate this thinking into the way they deliver services and how they communicate with the public. It says a great deal that the Ombudsman feels the need to do this, given the way human rights obligations weave themselves through every area of council service provision. The report highlights that when things do go wrong, council should think not only about the service provided, but about whether people's rights have been affected too, to ensure that things are put right and see that lessons are learned for the future. The report emphasises that human rights are not just for those facing persecution, but ensuring that people's part of the services councils provide and considered when designing and delivering services. According to the LGSCO, in the past year, the Ombudsman has carried out 103 investigations in which the Equality Act was a significant aspect in the investigation, and a further 51 where there were human rights implications. Most of those cases involved the right to private life, particularly in relation to people in receipt of adult care services. But other cases involved councils failing to provide education for children, or where adults were unfairly deprived of their liberty. The report utilises a series of case studies which examine what went wrong and how it could be resolved. The report also shares good practice and learning points from their investigations to help improve the quality of services more widely. Now, Dennis, I touched on this a few weeks ago, but I see that EU retained law is in the news again. What's happening there?
Yes, many groups are concerned about the lowering of standards that might occur if the government plans to remove legislation are implemented. Here's more on this. The Chartered Trading Standards Institute and a coalition of charities have launched a Safeguarding Our Standards campaign due to deep concerns that the government's proposed retained EU law bill could harm both consumers and businesses. The campaign attempts to persuade the government to scrap the bill's current deadline of the 31st of December 2023. The bill, proposed by former Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg in September, would mean redrafting and potentially scrapping thousands of laws that affect food and product safety and consumer rights, as well as environmental protections and workers' rights. The Institute say that the government should explore a phased approach to sunsetting legislation based on specific legislative areas. The campaign group has said that public polling has revealed that most people think the bill is a waste of parliamentary time. Amongst key findings from the public poll are, first, the public is most concerned about loss of protections in areas including food safety, product safety, and upholding laws that help enforcers crack down on scammers and rogue traders. Second, the public think that the government and Parliament should be prioritising their time dealing with the cost of living crisis, closely followed by action to tackle NHS waiting lists. And finally, the translation of EU legislation into UK law was ranked last by the public in a list of government priorities. The Institute revealed that a new survey of trading standards experts finds that the overwhelming majority believe that the government should consider dropping its commitment to sunset legislation by 2023. And almost 3/4 said that an arbitrary timetable to sunset all EU-derived legislation should be abandoned altogether. The concerns have led the Institute and a coalition of charities to launch the Safeguarding Our Standards campaign. And they've sent a letter to the Prime Minister expressing their concerns. It said, "We are calling on the government to amend its timetable for the implementation of the retained EU law bill and suggest a phased timetable with targets for specific areas of legislation." The group also called upon the government to give a cast-iron guarantee that UK consumers will be no worse off if the bill is introduced, with the highest standards for food, the safety of the products we use, and the protections that safeguard so many of us being maintained. So here's the question. Are we overregulated? And does this affect our ability to grow our economy? Or do we need existing laws to properly protect consumers and businesses?
Turning to Wales now, the Welsh Government are introducing new regulations expected to come into force on the 1st of October next year, which require all non-domestic premises, including businesses, the public and third sector, to separate key recyclable materials in the way the majority of Wales householders already do. The consultation focuses on the code of practice for the separation of collection of waste materials, with views sought as to whether it provides sufficient practical guidance. That consultation closes on the 15th of February next year. The Welsh Government are also consulting on the guidance for local authorities relating to council tax premiums for long-term empty and second homes, including changes to administration and enforcement. That consultation closes on the 22nd of December. Finally, the Standards of Conduct Committee, in its sixth report to the Sixth Synod, under Standing Order 22, concerned a complaint to the Commissioner in relation to a tweet posted by Dr. David MS. The Commissioner considered the tweet to be a vulgar and grossly offensive personal attack, and the committee decided not to reproduce the exact wording of the tweet within their report, as they considered it may cause further distress to the subject and their family to do so. So one can only imagine what that said. The committee, in so agreeing with Commissioner as to breach and censoring the member under Standing Order 2210, stated, "Members are rightly required to show leadership and to be exemplars of good behaviour. Abusive use of social media of the kind employed by Dr. David reflects badly on him, but also tends to bring the Synod into disrepute. Dr. David's conduct fell very far below the required standards." The committee also highlighted to members more broadly about the importance of treating interactions on social media in accordance with the same principles that would be applied to face-to-face interactions, and reminded members that there's support available in dealing with and using correctly social media. Now, Dennis, I know you've been a little unsettled this week after watching television. I know you're off your food because a Bush Tucker lunch doesn't appeal to you. What's on your mind? Let's talk this through.
Well, yes, you're quite right. It's that reality TV show last week. There's something not right about being a politician and a reality TV contestant all at once. And it's not just about the food. So, permit me to explain. I have never previously watched the TV program I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. As a cultural snob, I consider it to be utterly beneath my contempt, like so many of these so-called celebrity programs. Anyway, I rarely know the personalities who participate, so it would be entirely pointless. But I do know about Matt Hancock, and, as he was a contestant, I felt compelled to watch. This was Matt Hancock, former Health Secretary, part of the public face of the government pandemic response for over 2 years, and responsible for a number of highly controversial policy decisions under his stewardship. Indeed, he may yet be called to account for his conduct in office in the forthcoming public inquiry. And sadly, there are many who lost loved ones and who still want answers, including from him. And yet, there he was, a bullfrog sitting on his head, surrounded by eels, frogs, and spiders in a tank of water. Images that will stay with me for a long time. But I felt very uncomfortable about the whole thing. It doesn't seem right or proper that Mr. Hancock should be doing any of these things, and especially not now. He's an MP with responsibilities for his constituents at the time of a cost of living crisis, and, as I say, he's yet to account for himself in the pandemic inquiry. Yet, Hancock follows in the steps of other parliamentarians who see themselves as entertainers, or perhaps they want to present a certain profile to the public. Something like, "Look at me, I'm Mr. Normal." There is no legal rule or code or procedure that prevents him or others from being involved, and certainly Hancock's own conscience did not stand in his way on this occasion. If reports are correct, Hancock abandoned his constituents to appear on reality TV for £500,000. He successfully got to the final, if you think that amounts to some measure of success for an ex-health secretary. But my main point is this. Should there be ethical rules to prevent MPs or other politicians from entering the world of TV celebrity, and in particular reality TV? Is it compatible with the responsibilities of holding office in public life? And, the Hancock case apart, where would we be in ethical terms, or in terms of public perception, if prominent local councillors or elected mayors or elected police and crime commissioners took to doing something similar? Or is all of this simply none of our business? And before I leave this item, I should point out that Mr. Hancock has been suspended from the Conservative Party for neglecting his parliamentary role, and has indeed been severely criticised both by the Prime Minister and across the political spectrum. And for accuracy, I should mention that it is reported that Hancock received a further £45,000 for appearing on yet another celebrity TV programme called SAS Who Dares Wins. Another show that I missed, unfortunately, Helen.
I've got some good news for you, Dennis. There's always TV catch-up, you know. You could fill an entire evening watching nothing but Matt Hancock on the television. Just imagine that. So last week I blogged about undervaluing legal services and the exclusion of the monitoring officer in respect to findings published by the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny in relation to Southampton Council. Grant Thornton have now published a report into the West of England Combined Authority, which centred on why the monitoring officer and chief finance officer were excluded from decisions on a severance payment. Section 5 of the report examined the approach to obtaining legal advice. It's a superb illustration of why the Golden Triangle, the relationship between the chief executive, MO and 151 officer, is so important to good governance. Here, the CEO commissioned legal advice which went against the advice of the MO. Grant Thornton found in the report that the role the MO and head of legal had is particularly important when commissioning and interpreting third-party advice, stating that the MO is party to the wider context and can exercise professional experience to ensure that the right advice is sought and the right information given. Further, that by bypassing the MO in this case and failing to make alternative provision for the discharge of the MO's responsibilities, it highlights the risk that is taken when legal advice is sought independently of the MO. Grant Thornton also noted in their report that there is a proposed restructure at the authority to downgrade the role of the MO to below senior director, and warned that regardless, the responsibilities under statute would remain unchanged and that safeguards must be put in place to ensure the role of MO can continue to be delivered unabated. And on that note, that's it for another edition of the podcast. You can read more on that, the items discussed today, and many more besides by going to bulletin number 44, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too.
Thank you for listening,